Yeah, so we're going to start with our first question here. It says, why does the market labor demand curve slope downwards? Explain using the concepts of marginal revenue product and diminishing marginal returns. All right. So first of all, the reason why the demand curve is sloping downward is because at higher wage rates, employers will hire few workers, and at lower wage rates, employers are going to hire more workers. Okay, let me just put it here. We have the wage rate on the y axis here. Here, we've got the quantity of workers, the number of workers. So our labor demand curve is downward sloping like this. All right. So just think of it. Let's say if you've got 10 workers working for you, all right, and then you're paying them 1,000 kwacha each. And then the minimum wage increases to 2,000, meaning you have to pay all those 10 workers 2,000 kwacha each. All right. Let's say here the wage for the workers is 1,000 each, and you've got 10 workers. Then they've said the minimum wage has to be increased. It's now 2,000. All right. So at this 2,000 kwacha minimum wage here, it will be expensive to keep all those 10 workers. So you might have to reduce the number of workers. You might have to lay off some of those workers. Okay, let's say you reduce from 10 workers to 5 workers. Okay, because the salaries you're paying them is too high. Okay, it has increased. So it means you don't want to increase your costs. So it means you have to lower some of the workers. Okay. And then let's say again, scenario two, again, you've got 10 workers paying them 1,000 each. And let's say they're now able to pay each worker 500 kwacha each. Okay. Let's say the wage now drops. They say that, okay, you can pay workers 500 kwacha each. Since now the wage rate is lower, you'll be tempted to hire more workers. Okay. Maybe you hire 5 more workers. Okay. So that is one the main reason the labor demand curve is downward sloping. All right. Any questions on that before now we go to the principles of diminishing marginal returns and the marginal revenue product? Are we okay with that first part? Okay. So now we're going to explain why this demand curve is downward sloping using the principles of marginal revenue product and the diminishing marginal returns. So the marginal revenue product, this is the additional revenue each worker brings to your firm. Okay. The additional revenue each worker brings to your firm. That's the marginal revenue product. Then diminishing marginal returns. Okay. The more workers that you hire when you've got fixed land, fixed capital, all right, the more workers that you're going to hire, eventually the extra output that they're going to bring in is going to drop. Why? Because you've got fixed capital and fixed land, right? So if you continue hiring more workers, it at first the first workers you initially hire are going to be bringing extra output. But the more workers you keep on hiring, all your machinery is fixed, your land is fixed. Eventually, the more workers you continue bringing in, the additional output that they'll bring in is going to drop. Okay. And as the additional output that they bring drops, also the additional revenue starts to drop. Okay. And that's why that's how those two concepts explain why the demand curve is downward sloping. Let me just use this table to illustrate what I'm saying. Okay. Let's say you are a business, right? And let's say maybe you've got your capital is fixed. So let's say you produce t-shirts, right? You produce t-shirts, and let's say you've got three machines. Okay, you've got three machines, all right, and maybe I've got you're all working in one small room. Okay, so few machines, one small room. Okay, first, when you hire no workers, you're not making any output. The marginal product, this is the additional output each worker brings. There's no additional product since you're at zero. And the marginal revenue product, which is the additional revenue that each worker brings, okay, is also nothing. And let's say each t-shirt is selling for $5. Okay. So you hire the first worker. The first worker is able to produce 10 shirts. Okay. So the additional product or the additional produce this worker has brought from 0 units, you're producing 0 units at first. You're now producing 10 units. So the additional product that this worker has brought, or the marginal product, is 10 shirts. So for these 10 shirts that this worker has brought in, right, each shirt is going for $5. So 10 times $5, this worker has brought in $50 to your company. Okay. This is the additional revenue this first worker has brought. All right. Let's say you bring in your second worker. Your output increases from 10 shirts to 18 shirts. The additional output this second worker has brought is 8 shirts. Okay, 18 minus 10. The additional output is brought 8 shirts. So the additional revenue this worker has brought 8 shirts. This additional 8 shirts times $5 per shirt. The additional revenue this worker has brought is $40. You bring in your third worker. Your output increases from 18 shirts to 24 shirts. Remember, your machinery is fixed. Okay, let's say in this case, since the more workers are bringing in, the additional produce they're bringing is dropping. So let's say in this case here, let's say you've only got maybe two machines. Okay, yes, and you're working, and your land is fixed. Let's say you're working in a room, a small room. Okay, so you bring in the third work, your output grows from 18 to 24 sheds. Okay, two machines, three workers. Right. The additional product that this third worker brings, you say 24 minus 18, they have brought in six additional sheets. The additional revenue this third worker has brought in $5, uh, $5 per sheet times six, $30. Okay. You hire another worker. Remember, two machines. You've now got four workers. Your output increases to 28 sheets. The additional product that this fourth worker has brought 28 minus 24, four sheets. The additional revenue, each of these four sheets cost $5. So the additional revenue, 4 times $5, $20. Now, colleagues, what we can see here is this. When your land and your capital is fixed, the more workers that you bring in, the less extra output they bring. And the less extra output they bring, the less additional revenue they bring. So as you can see, the additional revenue is dropping the more workers we hire. So, okay, so this is also explaining why the demand curve is also downward sloping, because the more workers we hire, the less additional revenue each worker brings, meaning the marginal revenue product starts dropping as we hire more people. So that's why the demand curve is downward sloping according to the marginal revenue product and the diminishing marginal returns. The diminishing marginal returns is saying each worker that comes in while your land and your machinery is fixed brings in less output. Then the marginal revenue product part is saying as they bring in less output, they're bringing in less additional revenue. All right. So that's why the demand curve is downward sloping according to these two principles. Yes. Any questions, colleagues, before we go to question two? Any questions? Okay. Yes. So if you want to hear more about this, it's also in the lesson for demand for labor. Okay. All right. Question part B. Why is the market supply curve typically upward sloping? Explain using the income and substitution effects. Okay, so colleagues, first let's understand the income and substitution effect. Okay, the substitution effect, okay, it tells us the higher the wage, when you increase the wage, it will encourage people to work more and substitute leisure for working. Okay, so substitution effect, labor supply increases, okay, or you work more hours because you are substituting leisure for work. Okay. So according to the substitution effect, you're putting in more hours, the wage rate increases. Then the income effect, okay. The higher wage, now you don't need to work more hours. You can now start resting because you're making more money. Okay. So according to the income effect, you are going to work few hours because you're now rich. You have now reached your goal. So you're going to work few hours now. Okay, because you're already making as much money as you need. So you can see this graph here. Okay, you have the wage rate on your y-axis and then number of hours worked on the x-axis. Okay, so at first, as the wage rate is increasing, you're substituting leisure for work. You're working more because you want to earn more money. Okay, you want to earn more money, you want to get that promotion. So you're putting in more work. You're resting less. All right? You want to make more money. Here, the substitution effect is greater than the income effect. But once you get that promotion, you become now a boss or the managing director. Your wage now is handsome. Okay, you're making now a lot of money. So now, as a boss, as a manager, as a director, you're not going to want to put in as much work as you are putting in earlier on. You want to start enjoying your money. So you can find the number of hours worked starts dropping. Okay? Because now you want to rest and enjoy your money. So that's how the substitution and income effect explain the backward bending curve. So remember, substitution effect, you work more hours. As the wage rate, as your wage increases, you work more hours and substitute leisure for work. Then the income effect, as your wage rate increases, you now work less hours because you've reached your goal. You want to enjoy your money. Okay. So, which effect wins? It depends also on your condition. All right. If you are in the at your workplace, you're at the bottom there, the substitution effect is going to be more because you want to earn more money. Okay, you're going to substitute leisure for work. But when you're in the upper level of your company, you're part of the managers and the directors there. Your wage is okay, so you don't have to work as many hours as you were working before because you're making more money.